It is the culmination of decades of struggle for independence, identity, and resilience in the face of enormous global pressure. The phrase, "final stand," doesn't necessarily mean a last battle, but rather the last phase in a long journey of defiance, strength, and self-determination. Iran has consistently positioned itself as a sovereign nation, unwilling to bend under the weight of foreign influence, economic sanctions, or military threats. This moment in history, where Iran stands boldly despite international isolation and external attacks, marks a turning point where it asserts not just its sovereignty, but also its dignity and national voice. The world has often misunderstood Iran's resistance. To many outside observers, its refusal to comply with Western demands might seem like stubbornness or aggression. But to the Iranian people and leadership, it is about preserving a nation's right to govern itself without being dictated by external superpowers. The concept of sovereignty is not merely a matter of borders. It is a deep-rooted right to cultural, economic, and political self-rule. Iran has faced revolutions, wars, assassinations, cyber attacks, and sanctions, all aimed at bending its will. But instead of folding, the country has developed a powerful narrative of strength that resonates with millions, not just within its borders, but across regions that see themselves as victims of global injustice. Strength, in Iran's context, is not just military might. Yes, it has invested in defense technology, missile programs, and proxy networks. But the real strength lies in its ability to survive and adapt. When Western powers imposed crippling sanctions, Iran did not collapse. It turned inward, cultivated domestic industries, sought new trade partnerships with Eastern countries, and doubled down on innovation in oil, agriculture, and medicine. The youth of Iran, educated and tech-savvy, didn't let sanctions silence them. Instead, they became part of a new voice, one that seeks to blend tradition with modern ambition. This internal resilience is a form of silent power, one that frustrates enemies because it cannot be bombed, hacked, or sanctioned into submission. The power of voice is another pillar in this final stand. Iran has understood the battlefield is no longer limited to tanks and drones. The war today is also one of narratives, media, and perception. And in this space, Iran has increasingly sharpened its presence. It uses platforms, channels, and public diplomacy to project its perspective to the world. It voices opposition to Western double standards, stands firm for the Palestinian cause, and challenges the monopoly on global truth-telling. In doing so, Iran is not just speaking for itself, but often echoing the frustration of millions in the global south. Nations tired of being treated as pawns in the games of empires. This final stand is also deeply spiritual and cultural. Iran, with its rich history, poetic soul, and religious identity, is not just another state, but a civilization. The blend of Shia resilience, Persian heritage, and revolutionary zeal makes its identity unique, and this identity is something Iran fiercely protects. While others may compromise values for temporary alliances, Iran's power lies in staying rooted. Whether it's the black chador of a woman walking through Tehran, the chants of students in Qum, or the mourners of martyrs in Karbala, inspired processions, Iran's voice is deeply tied to its spirit. That spirit, unshaken by bombs or embargoes, is what makes this stand so meaningful. So when we speak of Iran's final stand, we are witnessing not a retreat, but a proclamation. a declaration that it will not be silenced, not be broken, not be enslaved by economic levers or military threats. It is the voice of a nation saying, "We choose our path, we remember our martyrs, and we believe in our destiny." Whether the world agrees or not, Iran is making it clear its sovereignty is not negotiable, its strength is not accidental, and its voice will echo louder than ever in the pages of history. Iran's concept of sovereignty is deeply rooted in its historical, cultural, and political consciousness. For Iran, sovereignty is not just a principle written in law or a theoretical idea. It is a lived reality that has been earned through sacrifice, revolution, and resistance. When Iran speaks of sovereignty, it refers to the complete and undeniable right to govern itself without interference from foreign powers. This is especially significant given the country's long history of invasions, colonial manipulations, and international sanctions. Iran's people and leaders understand what it means to be controlled by outside forces, and that memory fuels their determination to never let it happen again. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was one of the most defining moments in this journey. It was not simply a regime change. It was a public rejection of foreign, imposed systems and values. The revolution overthrew a monarchy that was supported by Western powers and replaced it with a government that declared itself independent in both ideology and policy. This was the beginning of Iran's modern commitment to absolute sovereignty, even if it came at great cost. Over the decades, this determination has been tested repeatedly. Whether through direct military threats, like the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, or through heavy economic sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies, Iran has remained unwavering. The government and people have consistently made it clear that they will not trade their independence for short-term comfort or financial gain. When the world demanded that Iran stop its nuclear program, Iran saw it not only as a scientific and strategic project, but as a symbol of national pride and self-reliance. Even when faced with severe consequences, such as international isolation and financial hardship, Iran continued to pursue what it saw as its right. To outside observers, this may appear as stubbornness, but for Iranians, it is about principle and dignity. Sovereignty to them is sacred and cannot be compromised. This stance is further strengthened by the belief that outside forces do not always act with honest intentions. Iran has witnessed regime changes, invasions, and interventions across the Middle East, often justified by slogans like democracy or human rights, but resulting in chaos and suffering. These examples have made Iran more skeptical of foreign involvement and more committed to steering its own course. Iran's leaders argue that many global powers use diplomacy and soft power as tools of domination, attempting to weaken nations from within. In response, Iran has fortified its political system to be less vulnerable to foreign influence, limiting external cultural and political penetration and maintaining a strong internal narrative of independence and resistance. Iran's sovereignty also extends into its economic decisions. While most countries depend on Western markets and financial institutions, Iran has made deliberate choices to build partnerships outside that sphere. It has strengthened trade ties with countries like China and Russia and explored regional economic cooperation through organizations like the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. These moves are strategic steps to break free from Western financial systems that can be used as weapons. By doing so, Iran sends a clear message that its economic survival and growth will not be dictated by those who wish to control it. The Iranian people, too, carry this spirit of sovereignty. From students and workers to religious scholars and scientists, there is a widespread cultural pride in being a nation that refuses to bow down. The sanctions and hardships they have faced are seen not just as burdens, but as proof of their country's independence. They take pride in the idea that they are part of a nation that speaks for itself, makes its own laws, and stands up for its beliefs. This national character, formed by centuries of challenges and fueled by revolutionary energy, defines Iran's final stand. It is not about aggression or expansion. It is about drawing a line and declaring to the world, "We decide our future, and we will not surrender our right to do so." Iran's ability to endure extreme external pressure and still function as a nation is a reflection of its deep internal strength and resilience. Over the years, Iran has faced some of the harshest economic sanctions in modern history, political isolation on the world stage, and constant threats of military confrontation. Yet, despite these overwhelming challenges, the country has not collapsed. This survival is not accidental. It is the result of a national mindset built on endurance, innovation, and adaptability. When many expected the Iranian economy to break under the weight of sanctions, Iran instead began building a new kind of self-reliance. It invested heavily in domestic industries, expanded local production capabilities, and developed scientific and technological sectors that could continue operating without Western support. The country recognized early that dependency on foreign powers was a strategic weakness, and it made conscious efforts to become as self-sufficient as possible. One of the clearest examples of this resilience is seen in Iran's scientific community. Despite international restrictions that blocked access to global research and limited technology transfers, Iranian scientists and engineers continued to make progress in fields like nuclear technology, aerospace, medicine, and nanotechnology. Iranian universities and research centers became hubs of innovation, producing local solutions to problems that other countries might have addressed through imports. This culture of internal problem solving turned hardship into a training ground for national capability. The youth, especially, have played a crucial role in this process. Young Iranians, raised in an environment of constant challenge, grew up with a mentality that encourages creativity and persistence. They learn to work with limited resources and still produce world-class outcomes, proving that strength does not always come from abundance. It can also come from determination. Iran's agricultural and industrial sectors have also adapted impressively. With sanctions cutting off many essential imports, the country expanded its local farming, improved irrigation techniques, and developed new ways to process and preserve food without relying on global supply chains. Small factories and local businesses received support to fill the gaps left by the absence of foreign companies. Over time, these efforts reduced Iran's vulnerability to external shocks. Although the standard of living has been affected in many ways, the overall system has remained functional, and the country continues to grow in key areas. This is not to say that there is no suffering or difficulty. There is. But the fact that Iran has kept moving forward in spite of everything is a testament to its internal fortitude. Another layer of Iran's strength comes from its culture of unity during crisis. In moments of national stress, such as assassinations of key figures, bombings, or military threats, Iranian society often rallies together rather than breaking apart. Religious, cultural, and historical values create a strong sense of national identity that helps people endure pain and uncertainty with purpose. Iranian leaders have successfully used this sentiment to mobilize the population, emphasizing sacrifice and national pride. This creates a kind of social shield, one that makes it harder for foreign pressure to destabilize the country from within. Even protests and disagreements within Iran happen within a framework of loyalty to the homeland, showing that despite internal differences, the majority still values national survival above personal interest. Iran's resilience has also shifted its foreign relationships. As Western doors closed, Iran turned eastward, building new alliances and trade partnerships that operate outside traditional Western influence. These new networks have allowed Iran to keep exporting oil, buying essential goods, and investing in infrastructure. The shift has not been easy, but it reflects a clear strategy. Iran is not waiting for the world to accept it. It is building an alternative path. This internal strength, built on years of struggle, innovation, and unity, is one of the main reasons Iran continues to stand strong. It is not just the government that is fighting to survive, it is the entire population driven by pride, purpose, and the will to endure no matter what the outside world throws at them. Iran's strength has never been defined by military power alone, but by a unique combination of strategic defense, cultural identity, and ideological conviction. Over the years, Iran has developed a defense strategy that is not limited to traditional warfare. Instead, it blends military readiness with psychological, ideological, and regional influence, forming a deeply layered system of protection. This includes advanced missile technology, local arms production, and a complex network of regional allies. Iran's military doctrine emphasizes deterrence, sending a clear message to its adversaries that any aggression will come at a high cost. By building up a defense infrastructure that includes underground missile bases, anti-air systems, and drone programs, Iran has made it extremely difficult for foreign forces to consider a direct invasion without expecting serious consequences. These developments have been carried out despite years of sanctions and international pressure, proving that Iran's defense capacity is based on self-reliance rather than dependency on foreign suppliers. But what makes Iran's defense even more formidable is how deeply it is tied to culture and ideology. The country does not frame its military strength in purely tactical terms. Instead, it wraps it in the language of resistance, martyrdom, and divine duty. This is not just a strategy, it is a narrative that inspires people. The memory of the Iran-Iraq War, where thousands of young volunteers gave their lives in defense of the homeland, still plays a major role in shaping public attitudes towards sacrifice and duty. Iranian media, education, and public ceremonies constantly reinforce this spirit, making the idea of defense more than a military action. It becomes a cultural and spiritual mission. Soldiers are not just professionals, they are seen as guardians of the revolution, the faith, and the nation's future. In addition to this internal foundation, Iran's influence across the region has created an extended defense system. Through support of allied groups in Lebanon, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen, Iran has created what many refer to as a resistance axis. These groups, while often controversial, serve a strategic purpose from Iran's point of view. They act as a deterrent by increasing the cost of any conflict that may be launched against Iran. Any attack on Iran risks igniting conflicts in multiple regions, drawing in fighters and resistance groups who see themselves ideologically aligned with Iran's mission. This network allows Iran to push back against threats far beyond its own borders, turning a regional map into a layered security system. It is not about expansion for dominance, but about expanding influence for protection. Cultural defense also plays a critical role. Iran protects its values fiercely, whether in media, education, or religious practices. It sees foreign cultural influence, particularly from the West, as a potential threat to its identity. This is why the country closely regulates media, promotes local arts and cinema, and elevates traditional values in public life. These efforts are not just about politics. They are seen as defense mechanisms to protect the soul of the nation. Iran believes that if it loses its cultural identity, it loses its ability to stand on its own. So, even as it builds missiles and trains soldiers, it is also building schools, hosting cultural festivals, and preserving languages and customs. These elements are deeply interwoven with the country's view of national defense. The combination of these strategies, military, ideological, and cultural, makes Iran's defense posture very different from typical global powers. It is not just about preventing war, but about ensuring long-term survival and sovereignty. The strength that comes from this model is hard to defeat because it is not centralized in one weapon or base. It lives in the minds and hearts of the people, in the regional alliances formed through shared beliefs, and in the cultural systems that keep Iranian identity strong. Iran does not just defend borders, it defends an entire way of life. And this layered strength is what gives it an unshakable position, even when surrounded by powerful enemies. In today's world, wars are not only fought with tanks, missiles, or drones, but also with words, images, and narratives. Iran has come to understand this reality very clearly. The battle for global perception, the war of stories and voices, is just as critical as any armed conflict. Over the years, Iran has built its own tools and platforms